The year 2000 was the year of the Bombers. After losing to Carlton in the previous year's prelim final by a single point, Essendon were out for revenge. And their start to the 2000 season was like no other. 20 wins in a row and 0 losses. Going into their round 21 match against the Bulldogs, they had already secured the minor premiership with top spot on the ladder. There were only 2 rounds left in the season, and if the Bombers won both games, they would become the first club to go undefeated for the entire home and away season since Collingwood in 1929. Essendon went on to beat Collingwood in round 22 and not lose a single finals game, eventually becoming premiers. But round 21 was where things got interesting. Bulldogs coach Terry Wallace went into this match with a very smart game plan, which would later become known as the Super Flood. It involved most of the Bulldogs players flooding Essendon's forward 50 to make it difficult for the Bombers' attack to score. Wallace had actually used a similar game plan 2 weeks earlier against second place Carlton, who were on a 13-game winning streak. By implementing a loose man down back, the Bulldogs ended up winning 75-72. But for this match, the flooding was much more extreme. As many as 14 Bulldogs players occupied the team's defensive half of the ground. This was extremely unusual to see at the time, as teams rarely did it at all. In addition to this, Wallace misled Essendon coaching staff leading into the game, stating to reporters that the Dogs would need to kick goals because he didn't expect a 12-goal game similar to the Carlton one. The club also secretly trained for the game plan at Chirnside Park instead of opening training sessions at Whitten Oval to keep it hidden. The Bulldogs-Bombers match was played under the roof at Colonial Stadium, which meant the conditions were perfect and that Essendon had no excuses if they lost. The Dogs won the very first centre clearance before a diving mark from Matthew Robbins 10 metres out from goal capped off a brilliant start, but he shanked it. Nathan Brown's low left foot snap and Stephen Kolyanik's drifting set shot from 40 gave the Dogs an early 13-point lead. The Super Flood was paying off, with Essendon really struggling to generate scoring opportunities. It took a 50-metre penalty against Steve Krediak for knocking the ball away for Stephen Alassio to kick the Bombers first. The Bulldogs quickly responded when Nathan Eagleton won a free kick for a high tackle and scraped it in from 50. In this play, Don's All-Australian defender Damien Hardwick was rushed off the ground with an ankle injury and never returned, a massive blow to the Essendon defence. After Coleman medalist Matthew Lloyd guided through his first on the run and Tony Liberatore roved the ball and quickly snapped it through on his left, the Dogs' lead was back out to 2 goals. To round off the quarter, Dustin Fletcher left his position from fullback and ran up the ground to deliver a bomb from 60 metres out. Unfortunately for him, it narrowly missed to the left. The Bulldogs led by 5 points going into the first break. The second quarter opened with Essendon taking their first lead of the game thanks to Fletcher sneaking up forward, taking a mark and finding the goals. Following this, Blake Caracella sent forward a hurried shot for goal, but it fell just short. That was no problem, as the ball landed on Adam Ramanauskas' boot and rolled through. This Bombers' surge of goals continued, with Joe Mercedes winning the centre clearance and Mark Mercury converting from 45 after plucking the 2-grab mark. Dermot Brereton believed that the Dons had found a solution to the Super Flood tactic.
Let's keep it corridor. The last 3 kicks have been there.
But that simply wasn't the case, which would prove itself later on. Simon Garlick scored the Bulldogs' first of the quarter from 45 out, but after Chris Grant's terrible turnover in defence, it was Dean Rioli's chance to punish him. Instead, Rioli piled on his 4th missed shot of the night. Fletcher's second goal from 60 metres out put Essendon 14 points ahead, their highest lead so far. Brad Johnson then kicked the last 2 goals of the quarter to level scores at half-time. But only seconds before the half-time siren sounded, the Bombers' John Barnes hit Johnson with a huge hip and shoulder to the head. As a result, a huge fight broke out. Players were throwing jumper punches left, right and centre. At this point, fans of both clubs all realised that this game was going to get heated. Gary Moorcroft was the first to strike at goal in the second quarter, but the goal sneak only managed 1 behind. After a bunch of behinds from both teams, Brad Johnson retaliated against John Barnes for bumping him earlier by striking him in the back of the head during a marking contest. However, there were no fights this time. It was the Bulldogs who would kick the next 2 goals of the match. The first came off the boot of Garlick, who won a free for front-on contact against Ramanauskas. The second was from big tall forward Trent Bartlett, who, after the Dogs ran the ball all the way from their back line to forward 50, slotted it on the run. This opened up a 10-point lead with the Western Bulldogs' 4th consecutive goal. Soon after, Fletcher equalled his career best tally with 3 goals. Darren Buick put his name on the goal kickers list, and Jason Johnson marked in the square and converted. Finally, to end off the premiership quarter, Justin Blumfield took a huge specky in the pack, with his goal giving the Bombers a 15-point 3/4 time lead. But despite what everyone probably thought, Essendon would need all 15 of those points in the end to even have a shot at winning. And just like that, the most important quarter of Essendon's entire season began. They started it strongly, with a tough contested mark from Blumfield while he was being held, ending in his 2nd major in a row. That marked 5 Dons goals in a row and a 22-point lead. But coach Terry Wallace later commented that at this point in the game, everything was going to plan. You see, Essendon had been forced to really fight for the ball because of the Bulldogs' zone defence, making them very fatigued by this point in the game. 3 injuries to Essendon players was also another crucial element in the Dogs' favour, which is why they dominated the last 10 minutes of this game. Chris Grant goaled his first straight out of a ruck contest, while Stephen Kolyanuk's 2 consecutive goals narrowed the margin to just 5 points. Paul Hudson kicked 3 behinds for the Dogs, and Brad Johnson missed from 40. The margin was a single point. Now, there was 2 minutes remaining. Nathan Eagleton overhead marked a little Mitch Hahn poke kick. Eagleton needed to either score a point to draw or a goal to take the lead. But what did he do? He missed everything. But that's when Dustin Fletcher clumsily kicked the ball off the ground, out on the full. 300-game Hall of Famer full forward Chris Grant had the kick.
36th possession.
Over left foot.
He kicked the goal to bring him back into the game. It's a great kick. He's kicked it.
Grant's left foot snap from a tight angle gave the Bulldogs a small 5-point lead. It wasn't over just yet though. Michael Long hooked a high kick to the square in search of Matthew Lloyd, but Matthew Croft's defence was simply too good. As the clock ticked down and the siren sounded, 45,000 AFL fans had just witnessed possibly the most impossible win the AFL has ever seen. Subscribe.